right, guys, welcome back. Episode number 5, The Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Continuing here with Michael and Athena, bringing them back, having some fun. Only 2 episodes left to go, guys. How are you feeling? You feel like we're missing out on a lot of stuff because it's such a short season? Or are you getting fulfilled with these episodes? Athena?
Missing out on everything. Just kidding. It's not too bad. No, I don't think so. I think we're learning a lot, some really cool backstories, and I think this episode in particular is interesting because you get a glimpse of, young Mr. Sir Dunk.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with Duncan and even Sir Arlen in this episode. So we get another glimpse into their relationship. But Michael, how are you feeling so far as we enter episode number 5?
Yeah, feeling good. I do think they're a little short, but we're getting the story in. We are learning a lot, and we're moving through time quickly. So good. I've been happy with it.
Yeah, I feel like if they were, again, to throw in some more filler type of stuff like that, that would be stuff that I would just forget. Yes, I would enjoy the episode for being longer, but I think that we're getting the big pieces that we need to. So let's get right into it. We left last episode with Baylor stepping up and being the 7th member for the trial by 7 in Dunk's honor. Baylor's, he's bringing the hype in. He's hyping these guys up. Like, he clearly shows that he is the experienced fighter of the group. He comes with a plan that Sir Lionel kind of questions as being ethical in a way, as far as the Kingsguard cannot harm him. So he's like, I will distract them. And Lionel's like, oh, we're all going to fight. And you're just going to basically cower behind this code of conduct that these Kingsguard have to stand behind. But Baylor comes up with a plan. It looks like they're all on the same page. They're getting ready to execute it. So, Athena, let's talk a little bit about this strategy as far as, I kind of talked about it last episode. If they were going to knight Egg, that he would be able to hide behind this boundary that the Kingsguard and I guess Makor, for that matter. And then I guess we got Damon on the other side. So 5 out of the 7 for Arian would not be able to fight. What do you think about this strategy that Baylor's come up with?
I mean, it's smart, and I think it makes sense almost for him to step up instead of it being Egg. I think, like what you were saying, it made sense. I think even reading in the book, you're like, oh man, Egg's it's going to be him. He's going to come up, and then all of a sudden this sort of comes out. But it sort of makes sense because I think with Baylor, he's also heir to the Iron Throne, so he's also a huge part of it. He's much closer to the throne than really Egg is at this point, or technically in the lineage sense. But also I think with him, he's very experienced. He was one of the commanders, in battle. He's been through a lot of things. He's a lot older, a lot more mature. And I think, again, just he's the wisest one out of all of them. Time and time again, he's constantly like the word of, the wise of what's going on. Like, he understands both sides. He knows that his family's a little crazy. He knows that the whole reasoning, I think, that they were put in that position is because of his family. And so I think it's almost in a weird way. It doesn't even say this in the books, but reading and even watching it's like he's trying to make amends for what it is that he's doing, because I think he cares about the people in a much greater sense. And I think Dunk to him is like the people, like that is, the ones of, Flea Bottom. They're the ones who are just the commoners. And I think he sees that and relates to that so much. And I think he understands why Egg also really cares about him. So I think it's like a weird protective thing. I think it's him trying to do an honorable thing, but it doesn't really say that, but that's what it feels. And it almost, what's strange is watching it on the show gave me that feeling more than when I read it in the book, if that makes sense, because you're sort of seeing it play out.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting too, because again, we talked about the House of Dragons being basically 100 years before this. And at House of Dragons, they have massive dragons and a lot of dragons. So in order for it to get to that point in 100 years, there has to be a lot of destruction, which makes me excited for House of the Dragons. But also those stories would still be fresh, as we hand them down to families. And I feel like there'd be this negative taste in people's mouths about the Targaryens. And I feel like Baylor is trying to right that ship a little bit. He's trying to step up and do the right thing. And I was kind of thinking about this, Michael. Let me run through the scenario. If they were to use Egg instead of Baylor, the Kingsguard could basically just hold Egg down. So that would take Egg out of play, whereas Baylor could actually hold his own, do some fighting, and kind of defend it a little bit more. But how awesome would the scene have been if at the end of the fight, Arian has Dunk down, getting ready to kill him, and then Egg comes up with maybe the Game of Thrones dagger and stabs Arian, saving Dunk's life. What do you think about that scene?
That's a good wild fantasy scene. It would have been epic. It would have been epic. I actually wonder though if Arian would have gone to the level of hurting Egg. So I
Yeah.
just wonder if he is off kilter enough to have done that.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not an environment for Egg to kind of be out there to figure out just how to walk in all this mud and this fog, and everything is coming at you quick. So it's not an ideal environment. This is definitely no Excalibur dinner and a show that you're getting here. This is real world, muddy, nasty, foggy environment. And I like that they recall that moment with Duncan Egg talking about, you better be here when I get back, or else I'll hunt you down with dogs. And he's like, you don't have any dogs. And so it's pretty cool. But I like what they did with the audio in this scene too, because you could tell a lot about Dunk's experience. He's getting nervous. This is really his first time that we've seen him inside this armor and this helmet. And it just goes to show that, when you're in that thing, you got blinders on, you can't see out of anything, you have nothing to focus on but the battle itself. And I like how they kind of muted the crowd noises and the environment, the horses, and all that stuff. And we see Egg yelling a couple times, and that doesn't even get through. But let's take a look at the beginning of the battle. We talked about the Targaryen armor, and this is just a great shot of how awesome this stuff is. Boom. We're in it now, boys and girls. Man, they get right into it right away, and I absolutely love it. I mean, Dunk, again, not ready to start, not very experienced. He forgets immediately Baylor's plan, which is stay on your mounts as long as you can, because 2 hits and Dunk is knocked off of that thing, and that lancer just sticking out of his gut, which later we find out didn't stab him. It just pushed the chainmail into his skin, which was crazy. I can't imagine having to pull that out of there. It's like a bunch of razor blades cutting you on the way out, but takes a big old hit with the what do they call that chain thing? I wrote it down somewhere.
Yeah, I will say though, real quick, while you brought up the weather, and as I rewatched that scene, man, the weather really did set the tone for this.
Yeah.
Not sure I captured that first time around, but even just rewatching that scene right there, the weather was really a cool effect.
Yeah, it was brutal environment, and he hits him with a chain mace is what I wanted to say, sending him basically back to his childhood, where we get a glimpse a little bit at Fleet Bottom, and that Dunk apparently has a type because Rafe looks very similar to Tansel to me. So he's just kind of looking for this certain type of girl. Athena does not look pleased, so I feel like we'll get into that in just a second. But they're basically going through all these dead bodies now. Athena, is this like the ending of the battle? Was it Blackfire or whatever?
Which, oh, yes.
Black Fire
Yep.
Rebellion, or is this just a normal fight?
No, I think this one's just their, if it's like the regular fight, it might be like what leads up to it, but I don't think it's the actual battle itself, no.
Okay, so basically they're picking off of the corpses of these soldiers trying to get enough money to flee the town and get out of Flea Bottom, which apparently we find out is only 2 silvers, which is probably equivalent to, probably $20. But anyway, he has, Dunk is kind of like me in this scene because he had a hard time leaving his mama. He's believing that his mom is going to come back and look for him, but Ray says, she's not coming back. You have to give up on it. So that tells me a little bit more about Dunk's loyalty. If he's still waiting for his mom that completely abandoned him, maybe he's not going to leave Egg's side. But whenever they go to the boatman to pay the fee, we find out that the fee is actually going to be doubled. And then they leave and make a bunch of bad choices with this one-armed guy. I don't know who he is, if he's a former soldier or what, but he's clearly somebody that they're afraid of and just continue to be picked on by him over and over and over again, almost bullied in a way. And then they go back to their 1-bedroom apartment in looks like downtown Chicago. And they're basically just slumming underneath of somebody's house or something. The environment is just absolutely terrible. But I don't get the impression, Michael, that this is a once in a long time thing. I feel like this is their home. I feel like this is where they're actually living. So trying to get out of that environment, I can definitely understand it. So let's kind of talk about Flea Bottom for a little bit. This is our really first glimpse into what living in Flea Bottom looks like. We've seen Flea Bottom before, but this environment, man, it's just terrible.
Yeah, and I think, in the slums, in these cities, all across, all the kingdoms we've seen in all these different Game of Thrones shows, it's just nasty. There's just nasty people. There's tons of people. There's always stealing. There's always stuff going on. There's always danger. People dying, people sick. And yeah, Flea Bottom's no different, and we see that right away.
Yeah, and Athena, this is our first glimpse at Sir Arlen really holding his own in battle as he comes out of the bar, basically drunk and wasted. And, the first thing he says, though, is leave that boy alone. And then, again, we continue with the theme of the Night of the Seven Kingdoms and projectiles coming out of the human body as he throws up. And then he gets into a battle. And ultimately, Rafe gets killed, gets her throat slit, and Dunk is there. I don't know why he's just staring at the dead body for such a long time. Maybe he feels like she's faking it. I don't know, even though her throat's wide open. And then Sir Arlen in the background holding his own ends up getting out of that situation. So before we get into more Sir Arlen stuff, Athena, you were shaking your head, kind of inform us of what's going on there in your mind.
Rafe is not a girl in the book. It's a boy.
Oh, okay.
It's a boy. So it's so interesting because it was so confusing kind of watching that and trying to understand, like, who is this? Is this, it didn't make sense. Now I love that it, talks about, him being in Flea Bottom, because again, it's disgusting. It's horrible. The conditions are bad. And, again, him being so young, still wanting to be honorable, still wanting to defend people. Like he's heroic without even realizing that he actually is heroic. And he's been for most of his life, and he's just not honoring that. But yes, in the book, Rafe is his buddy old pal who is a boy. So there's no like love connection. There's no him trying to save a girl, trying to be this whole, savior sort of thing. He's just trying to take care of his buddy, his friend who, who's been slumming it. So it just,
okay, so that had me worried a little bit. If it was going to be a guy-on-guy love story,
no.
I would not have picked up on that of anything that we've seen so far. So I would have been glad that they changed that. But I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm digging the love story. You're not feeling it though?
No, it goes back to even earlier episodes, with the girl. The whole reason he's in this mess is because of a woman that they make it seem like, oh, he was trying to shoot his shot, but he kept missing, and it's just not like that. Like his thoughts aren't in that way. Like it almost feels like he should have been, a man, at the wall is what it feels like, where his honors and his code, like he should have been there instead. It's his personality isn't I'm chasing the girl, like I'm honorable because I'm trying to save and protect a woman and all these things. And I think that's where I felt the show missed its mark, because he's honorable because that's just what he is, period, across the board. He doesn't need to be saving, a lady or something. And the whole purpose of the show is it's like he's saving a woman, he's doing this, his lifelong friend was a girl, but it wasn't a girl. It has nothing to do with that kind of love. It's more so he's just that good of a person, and I feel like it could have stuck to that storyline.
Okay, so you feel like they're kind of pulling away from his character building, and
Yes.
they're turning it more into a romance. Michael, how did this hit you?
Yeah, hearing that, yeah, because I was following the romance building and believing that story from when he was younger in Flea Bottom, and like we saw in the show, or when he was at the show at the theater. So yeah, that's really interesting to hear.
Yeah, I felt like it was a callback to him getting reminded of her. So I don't know. I'm buying it. I kind of like the TV show better. I mean, maybe Athena's not selling it all the way, but we do get a sense that Dunk is just loyal. I think we could all agree on that, whether it's book or TV. Dunk is loyal and he's a good person. And now that Rafe is dead, he has to find someone else to latch onto. So he decides to follow Sir Arland and see what this is all about. Okay, so this is interesting. So Sir Arlen is apparently either the most oblivious person in the world, or Dunk is very good at being stealthy, or they're just trying to play it off like he's not being seen. I'm not sure. But Michael, what do you think about Dunk just kind of following from afar? Do you think that, because in my impression that I get is that he followed Sir Arlen for probably a week and maybe about 15 to 20 miles before Sir Arlen even notices him. How do you feel from this?
Yeah, I also felt like it was for a period of time, like a week. I was thinking days, definitely. Um, yeah, he had nowhere to go, and I guess Sir Arlen, I guess, saved his life, right, in that scene, and so now he's attached and wants to help him out, just being Dunk, right, just being honorable. He wants to help care for this guy. But it's funny watching him run around and be a knight, right? He's training,
Mhm.
and he's just kind of cuckoo, man. He's kind of crazy.
Yeah, he's limping around because he's got a big old gash in the back of his calf muscle from that spear. But Athena, I have a question for you that I don't know if the book tells us anymore or if this scene is in the book, but we do see Sir Arlen with some skills fighting those two guys, and we do see him practicing his sword play, practicing on a regular basis. But I'm reminded by, I think it's Hot Pie in Game of Thrones, where he's talking about, you know, how do you know he was a knight? Well, he had armor. Well, not everyone who has armor is a knight. So, are we seeing enough from Arland here to be able to call him Sir Arland?
So I don't think you see it as much here. And again, it just goes back to, I think there's so many backstories that we still will eventually get to learn and will understand, later on. But for Sir Arlen himself, he definitely was a knight. And it's interesting though, because in the show, I thought it was really sweet. And I don't know if you caught up on it, but when, Dunk obviously the fight with his friend and, when he starts following Sir Arlen around, there's a scene where, there's the horse and then he sees the helmet. And that's Dunk's very first up close impression of, oh my gosh, is this a knight? Like, this is what a knight wear. Like, he knows what the knight's guard looks like. He understands that he's seen it from them, patrolling in Flea Bottom. And what's so interesting is his character is so perfect because in the book, that's pretty much how he is. Kind of this goofy sort of guy. You know, he's been through battles. He does have some, you know, toughness to him. But I think it's just one of those things where, you know, someone who's close to retirement, they're like, I'm enjoying life. I'm living my best life. I'm not in a war right now. I'm not in a battle. And I think in the book, it makes him like free, but because he's also trying to not think of what he's done. And like as a knight, like it's almost like his version of PTSD is just being like goofy and fun and hilarious. And it's interesting because you get the inkling that he knows that he's actually being followed. So he's extra wild about it. You don't get it too much from the show itself. Okay. But in the book, he knows that there's like, you know, a crack of a bush or, you know, the snap of a twig or a bird flies off. And he's like, you know, he knows like there's someone following him. Because again, he's also pretty prolific himself. And there's like little nuggets that you see throughout even the series of Game of Thrones where they talk about him and him being one of the best ones, as well as a knight. But you don't get it too much, I think, in the show. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I feel like that would have been an opportunity to like leave an apple on a rock or something on the side for Dunk, or leave him like a med kit to patch up his leg or something like that. One thing that's interesting, Athena, is that Michael speaks fluent Dothraki. So Michael is able to decipher this entire song for us. So Michael, why don't you tell us what Sir Arlen is singing here?
So excited.
Yeah, this one I have no idea. I don't speak Dothraki, but again, now it's interesting to hear Athena say he was playing this up knowing he's being followed. So that kind of adds an extra wrinkle to what he is singing. What is he actually? Is he even singing anything, right? Is he just being that over the top? It's crazy. Made me think he's crazy.
Yeah, that's the thing. I still don't even know how to judge Sir Arlen. I mean, obviously he's well equipped for battle off of his trainings and other things. But we then go to see Sir Arlen just kind of also clumsy and drunk in a way that he rolls over and cuts himself, which this isn't the fatal blow because obviously we see Dunk grow up. But, you know, maybe this is something that tells us maybe he wasn't in a fight and didn't cut himself. And this is actually how he dies, by basically just getting a laceration and getting infected. But what do you guys think about that scene? Do you think that's the way that he dies down the road, or do you think it's just like a one-time occurrence as far as how he cut himself on his stomach?
Opportunity where they're showing that Dunk can really step into his life and help take care of him. But yeah, so when they're showing them, you know, sitting at the tree, it is quite a ways down the timeline. So again, they must have to take care of him often.
Yeah. Let's see. We go back now to the fight scene where basically Dunk passes out and then Sir Arlen hovers over him, tells him to get up, and then that triggers us back into the fight where Dunk is remembering that moment. He then gets up. He's getting his ass kicked left and right, which kind of makes me wonder. I'll talk to Michael in a second about this, if he thinks that Arian could have won a 1v1 versus Dunk, because Dunk doesn't look to be handling his own right now. He's getting beat up. He continues to get stabbed and stabbed and stabbed and hit, and he's just taking a beating. It is gruesome. He gets a sword thrown at him and it gets stuck. His eye is basically bulging through the helmet, so he has to take off the helmet in a 7v7, which is not a great strategy at all. Kind of a dumb decision to make, but whatever. Then after getting stabbed so many times, he collapses, and it looks like that's it. He's done, because he had Arian, and then he just runs out of steam, goes to his knees, and eventually keels over, and what looks like he dies. So what do you guys think about this so far? You know, the fight so far. Athena, let's start with you.
I think the fight was really good. I liked the sound effects. I think it was like kind of crazy, chaotic, and you really have to like pay attention to who's hitting who, because see something ahead of you and you see something happening in the background. So I think it was very Game of Thrones, which I liked a lot. But it also kind of made it feel a little more heroic than the scenes are in the book. So it's literally just like punches and blows, and things are being dented and scrapped and pulled, and things like that. And there really isn't this like climactic pause where he's just like laying there for a long period of time. And so like there's like that part, but I think I liked how the show portrayed it as, because in the book it's fast, it's quick, it happens, it's messy, and then it kind of just moves on. But this kind of added a little bit more thought to it. So I actually really liked it. I thought it was a really good scene, and there's a lot of things in the battle that I thought was interesting, because you can also see some of the other houses, that are in there, House Baratheon with the stag. I love that they gave him a stag helmet, which is very true even in the Game of Thrones saga, like in that main one, because it shows that is what they use going into battle, and that shows how important that particular person is to them for House Baratheon. So I thought it was good. I liked the battle a lot.
Yeah, there wasn't anybody who was standing out and just dominating everything. I think everybody that was in this was just going to show how brutal it is. And I forgot to include it. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes, but there's a YouTube video where the guys break down every single scene. And in the background on one of these scenes, you could see where Maekar is hitting Baylor with a lance. And then I believe it was Raymond Fossaway who saves Dunk and hits Arian off of him at one point. So check it out on YouTube. I'll try and include it, but they break it down scene by scene, and it tells you who is hitting who and what's going on. But one thing I found interesting, Michael, is that everyone else involved in this fight, in the 7, they did a pretty good job of keeping the fight exterior and allowing Dunk to go one-on-one with Arian the entire time. So this leads me to the question that I want to ask you is, who do you think would actually win on a 1v1 fight between Arian and Dunk, now that we actually get to see them battling it out here?
Yeah, I was quite impressed with Arian, and actually I was surprised that Arian wanted to fight one-on-one, and that it seems like a great opportunity for Arian to hide back and to hang back and let everyone else fight and him just win, right? And so I actually think, if they did a 1v1, it would have come down to the same thing. It just would have been like a last-minute winner. Both of them getting beat up, both of them getting stabbed, severely hurt, and one of them's going to win at the end. So I don't think I find that quite interesting. Yeah, Arian being, as we talked about him earlier, as being spoiled, or he had a great opportunity to hide back, and he didn't take it, and he fought.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of interesting too, because if it was a 1v1 situation, I imagine they would still start off on their horses. And we get a clear glimpse that on their horses, Arian is way more skilled than Dunk. He holds his own very well. He knocks him off. And at that point, Dunk would have been basically unconscious on the ground. And I forget who it was that knocked Arian off the horse to kind of even the playing field a little bit. I think it might have been Lionel, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Again, I have to go back and watch it. But once he is on the ground, it does become a 1v1 on the ground. And we've seen that the show did a really good job of breaking this down ahead of time by Steely Pate basically saying, you want the chainmail for the 1v1 close fights. So that way, you won't get poked and sliced and stabbed, because we do see a scene where Dunk has Arian and he might have sliced off little Arian. And there's no way of telling, because that might be out there in the mud somewhere. We go back to that scene where Egg was talking about how Arian wanted to sneak in his bed and chop off his little Timmy. So maybe that's what actually happened to him out here in this battlefield. But yeah, it's very interesting the way that everything kind of goes here. But yeah, we cut to the end where we find out just how injured everyone is. Baylor enters and Dunk takes a knee. I'm sorry, before we get to that, in case you haven't figured out by now, Dunk basically wins the fight, the 1v1. He was told to get up one more time, this time by Egg. I'm sorry I spoiled this, but anyway, Egg yells at him, telling him to get up, and he is minutes, or not even minutes, like seconds away from getting the horn blown on him, where it's over and Arian wins. But Dunk was able to regroup himself, get into a 1v1 again, and handle Arian. But everyone's just basically beat up. Arian basically rescinds the charges against Dunk. Therefore, Dunk wins. The fight is over, and we find out that basically the only casualties of this so far were on Dunk's side. I believe there were 2 gentlemen that lost their lives. One was the orange mustache guy, and then the other one was the guy who had the broken leg. So the people that were just kind of there They lost their scenes. No major characters lost their life. And then we go to the end where we find out just how injured everyone is. Baylor enters, and then Dunk takes a knee, swearing himself to Baylor for the rest of his life, only to find out that that is the only thing shorter than my marriage, which only lasted 5 months, because Baylor takes off his helmet, and then that is pretty much it. We find out he's got a big old crater in his head, which is interesting because I talked about in that fight scene. You see Makor swing behind and hit Baylor in the back of the head. So he says, my fingers feel like wood. He collapses in Dunk's arms, and then the scene from Darian's visions of his dreams comes to light, and Baylor dies basically in Dunk's arms. So, yeah, ultimate sad ending in typical Game of Thrones style. In the penultimate episode, we lose a major character in a sad way. Michael, before we let Athena talk about the book and how the scene plays out, what do you think about the final episode or the final scene here in episode 5?
Yeah, again, like I said from the beginning, I was surprised to see Baylor put his life on the line and risk it, and then to come back and see that we lose him. But that's Game of Thrones style, right? We have to lose big characters. That's how this series works. And yeah, it was pretty crazy when we took the helmet off and he turned around and you're like, oh, he's about to die.
Yeah. Yeah, I found it interesting when he first says, my visor has a crack in it. And like I heard that part right away. And I was like, you don't have a visor on your head. But then he says, my fingers feel like wood. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting comment. And then you hear the helmet getting taken off, the crunch and crackle and the nastiness that comes with it. Athena, does this play out the same exact way in the book? And what did you think about the fight scenes?
Yeah, I mean, fight scene I think was great. I really liked seeing it. I think it's so hard to picture what that would look like. Like you can think of it day in and day out, but none of us have ever entered grand battle to really understand what that looks like. And I think Game of Thrones always knocks it out of the park when they do those. It feels like that is what it would probably look like. But in the book itself, when it closes, like where he talks about like where he gets, gashed in the back of his head, it's literally plain and simple, like chunk is out of his head. Like that was it. So okay, I think we got more out of it. No, it's what it's supposed to be. But I think what's really cool is that it really ties in like their their trial of 7. And so it also shows like the gods doing justice. But what's interesting is, again, you look at all the different people of the 7 who are in it. And even though the gods, like, you guys are the champions, you guys are the best, like you guys are the ones who win, even with his death at the end, you're kind of like, well, they won, but they actually kind of didn't win because they just lost someone. And so it is, yeah. And that's one of the things I think like George Martin always does. Like he finds a way where it's like it's more human. He's like, you can do good things, but even good things, bad things can still happen, especially someone being a hero, someone saves somebody and they could still die. And he does it in such a way where you're like, gosh, you just killed off another amazing person. What in the world? And he did it again. So
yeah, they won, but at what cost, So again, I love going back to the butterfly effects because now it's very interesting that you have the fallout that we're going to actually get another episode, and we'll discuss it here in a little bit, or I guess for you guys tomorrow. But anyway, it's interesting now because you have what is the relationship going to be like between Maker and Aryan? And then what's the relationship going to be like with Dunk and the Targaryens, So I'm very interested to see in the fallout of this. But before we get to episode number 6, we got some boning to do. So Athena, how many bones are you going to throw at this episode?
It could have been a 5 for me. I'm going to give it a 4 again because they changed a character, and I think that was an important piece to the puzzle that they just karate chopped in it.
Okay, I actually like the change, but Michael, what say you?
Yeah, I felt like this episode probably another one, a big turning point, very important episode. Fight scene was great. That they did actually make Dunk look dead. When he got up that second time, the final time he got up, he looked like he was dead, which was, a really good scene. I'll go 4.5.
Okay, so I was actually shocked. I figured this would be the highest rated episode, but it looks like we're sitting there at 8.5 bones. I enjoyed it. I would have gave it a 7 out of 5 bones, but I'm not voting here. Athena and Michael are in charge of that, which is it's just fun. That's why I like that we're doing it. But all right, we are going to see you guys next time with episode number 6, titled "Tomorrow." That's the season finale. We'll be right back.